With the completion of the first arc of Alfabusa's Hunter the Parroting series, I went back and reviewed all 3 of the main episodes and audio dramas, and shifting through it, I found myself loving the series even more than I did before with how the characters are handled with this setting. Being what replaced TTS, I wondered just how Alfabusa could transfer the feel of his writing style from such a ridiculous setting such as Warhammer 40k to something a bit more grounded and serious such as the setting for Vampire the Masquerade. And the answer was extremely well. Now, watching this series from the perspective of someone who's seen all of TTS but knows nothing about Vampire the Masquerade until I made this video, I have viewed this series from the perspective of someone going as blind as a TTS fan could. The pilot episode alone is brilliant with how it handles its first half. Door, Boy, Marcus, Kitten, and Big D are all vampire hunters, yet they're able to hide that fact surprisingly well in the first half of episode 1. I was honestly surprised when Door just whipped out a shotgun and blasted one of the vampires back in the second half. Before or after that, it was a nice slow burn as the characters are carefully introduced. You get to know where they are and a general sense of what they're doing here, before it reveals they're all vampire hunters and the action takes up the rest of the episode. The interactions between Kitten and Marcus in the first episode is my favorite. They're engaged lovers, but Alfabusa also doesn't throw that in your face immediately. That gets revealed only during combat with the vampires.
Hey! Why? Do yourself a favor? Stop brutalizing my fiancé, please!
Before that, you only had Big D calling Kitten his son-in-law. Marcus and Kitten walk along in the first half, speaking casually and with such familiar banter. The more observant viewer, unlike me, could pick up on the fact that these two are very close without the writing needing to have them say, hey, the two of us are engaged, while turning the screen to make it as plainly obvious as possible, which is neat because it rewards people for just paying attention to the story. The character Big D is my favorite for this reason. He acts a lot like a goof, and we see him behaving flamboyantly, and the guy took drugs in the first episode knowing that he might engage in combat that night, but Big D is an expert hunter, and that is exemplified in his serious moments, when he drops all pretense of wacky humor to say something, well, serious. Like when he and Kitten are discussing werewolves in the first audio drama.
Yeah, don't fight a werewolf, by the way.
Yeah, I heard they're tough. But with how well we did in the tunnels against those vampires, I'm confident that...
No.
What?
You aren't ready to fight a werewolf, son-in-law. Werewolves are killing machines. They are supernatural soldiers fighting a war we barely understand.
This contrast serves to get us to deeply consider what he says and take it seriously. Werewolves, should any come up in any of the later arcs, shall pose one heck of a threat. In spite of him being, well, wacky, little of what he does is without meaning. Like why Big D keeps information about their enemy from the family, because vampires have a tendency to hunt down and kill people they deem know too much about them. Big D, throughout the entirety of the first audio drama, gives us so much lore about this setting and a bit of how the mechanics about certain things work. Plus, get to flush out our characters and their relationships with one another. All in one nice organic package, and the other audio drama is much the same. Big D is interesting to me because Alfabusa has created such an outwardly wonky character, yet still has me take him seriously, while able to hand out lore dumps in an organic fashion. And he doesn't come across as one of those quote-unquote funny characters. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones that are incredibly one-note, that for some reason people think are just so hilarious because of how wonky they act, and only because they act wonky. Behind Big D as my favorite character has to be the 11-year-old Boy. He's meek and mainly a supporting role in the group. By the end of the third episode, however, he is the one who ends up putting down the vampire Pyotr, who's moving at fast speeds through the air and with a revolver no less. But he is still a child, one that took a life, however justified it was, and him shedding tears over it, especially after having that one-liner,
"It'll all be over soon,"
is Alfabusa portraying, well, a child being taught to kill vampires in a believable manner. And it's such a short moment, but it adds so much to make the situation feel more believable. It's these little details that I appreciate the most, especially this other one between Dor, Boy, and Kitten, where they're finding themselves alone with Pyotr on the loose. Dor mentions how he's going to go get his equipment from his old mining days to help in the fight against Pyotr, and then he gets a suit mainly for an EOD technician, someone who disarms and disposes of explosives for the military. We even see this tag on the front of it, like there are mines planted on the front yard of Kitten's house, and it becomes clear who's the one that placed them, and he used to be in the military, all without them, actually saying that outright. The writing is, for the most part, stellar, making details look odd or out of place before whipping out a fun little reveal, like when Kitten is using stilts to walk across the front yard of his house to flee from the vampire Pyotr. It's weird until it's revealed that there are landmines planted there, hence why he was using stilts, to keep the guy's eyes off the ground and disguise the weird way he moved across the lawn as just him being inexperienced with stilts. It's not all good though. Some jokes are just dumb.
Silver bells and cockle shells. Cock! Talking about Cockthorpe, relax.
You know Binham, about 4 miles from Warham?
I mean, yeah, quite close to Cockthorpe.
Yes, there's a town in England literally called Cockthorpe. But it's just them putting an emphasis on the cock part, and I guess someone thinks that's funny. There was also these pause moments where you get information from these, which is an example of some not so great storytelling, because it strikes me as I couldn't write an organic way of telling you this information, so we're just going to pause the episode and kill the pacing so you can just read about it. Plus, in the first episode especially, it feels like Alfabusa relies too much on TTS references.
Your funny little fort has been sieged, bloodbag.
It's not too in your face, so it's not going to feel like an outsider is missing something here, which I'm glad for. It's more accessible that way, but I really think this new series should be free to develop its own identity away from what came before. Other than those grievances, the way each of our main cast fights and talks in all 3 episodes and audio dramas tells us so much about who each of them are, and it all feels so organic. In a way a clever writer can make it to feel like you're watching actual people and not just fictional characters. I didn't know where Alfabusa could go after TTS was cancelled, yet after finishing this arc for his new storyline, I can barely contain my excitement for what's to come and see how these characters evolve in the next arc of the story. But what do you think? Agree with my assessment or not? Why not tell me what you think in the comments? Hit that thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and perhaps take a look at my other video essays over analyzing She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, or music analysis videos. You might enjoy my other content, and please consider subscribing.